All right. Welcome back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast, where today we have episode number 98, How to Lose Fat with a Slow Metabolism. So, this is going to be all about when you feel like your metabolism is broken or you feel like you're stuck. What do you actually need to do to lose fat effectively? And is your metabolism broken or is there something else going on? So, strap in, get ready for the ride. And I do want to let you know we don't interrupt this show midway with sponsored ads or asking you for ratings and reviews. So while you're getting settled, we ask that you just take 2 seconds to support our show by giving it a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Ratings and reviews allow us to bring more knowledgeable and influential people onto the show for you to learn everything possible about science and sustainability with respect to your goals. Now, if you like this show if you liked this episode in particular, screenshot it, tag us on Instagram to show your support. One share could be the catalyst for someone in your life to transform their body, their health, and their fitness for good. And of course, it helps our show grow too, and we appreciate that. So thanks again for listening. We don't take your attention for granted, so let's get right into it. Number 98, How to Lose Fat with a Slow Metabolism. All right. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. Just Marissa here today with a hopefully short episode. We'll see what happens. I have a good number of points to discuss with y'all, and I'm excited about this because I think that there is so much jargon out there about having a slow metabolism that really needs to be debunked. So basically, we're going to get into the intricacies of metabolism and metabolic science without bogging you down with a bunch of boring details, why people think they have slow metabolisms when there is usually more to the picture, but if there is something else going on, what to do about it and how to actually see results in spite of that. So, my inspiration for this episode was actually a conversation that I had with a client who was just trying literally everything. And we were coaching her. So we were turning over every single stone that we possibly could. But the weight loss was just slow, man. Like it was very, very slow and painstaking. It was like watching paint dry, and it'd be like a quarter pound a week here, half a pound a week here, all of this stuff. And it always brings people to beg the question, is my metabolism broken? Is my metabolism stuck? Is it, all these things. And people tend to, really trap themselves into a mindset that they're broken. So therefore they can't see results. Therefore they should give up. And that is absolutely heartbreaking because it usually isn't true. And then we get into a cycle of self-sabotage and not actually taking any actions that are productive towards our goals and actually going backwards rather than forwards. And so rather than thinking, I have a stuck metabolism, I'm broken, all of this stuff, I would encourage you to look at every single detail that you possibly can and really try to turn that over. So what I'm going to do today with you guys is really help you disseminate what is affecting your quote unquote metabolism. And I'll explain why I don't necessarily love the terminology in and of itself and how to reverse these effects to see the results that you want to see. So metabolism. What is it? I wish this was a video that I was recording right now because I would put on the screen a picture of all the pathways of what our metabolism actually looks like. It's wild. And so when we say I have a slow metabolism, it is absolutely ridiculous because we have no idea how many different things and processes in our body and our body systems actually contribute to our metabolism. And we are oversimplifying it to a point where it's almost insulting. And our metabolism is never broken because if our metabolism was broken, we would be dead. But our metabolism adapts. It's efficient. It wants to adapt. If you think about me versus a marathon runner, if I were to go on a 5-mile jog right now, I would basically die. Like my body is not used to that. I have not run in a very, very long time and everything would hurt. I would waste a lot of energy with terrible form and I would not do very well. However, if a marathon runner were to go on a 5-mile jog, that is very, very little running volume for them compared to how it is for me, right? So they would be very efficient. Their metabolism has adapted to not burn as many calories, not be, totally wiped after a run like that, because that person's body has adapted to learning how to conserve energy for the run and for the long run, right? And so our metabolism works the same way when it comes to fat loss. Just it doesn't actually work in our favor most of the time because we're trying to lose fat and our metabolism is adapting as a survival mechanism. Meaning, if we eat less calories, our body's going to be like, oh, hey, I'm getting less food. I might drop a little weight at first, but now I want to make sure that I don't shrivel up into nothing. So I'm going to downregulate my processes so that I can handle this level of calories and still function as a human being. But we notice that when we are in low calories for a long period of time, things like losing our period, hair falling out, overall energy being down tend to be very common because our body is kind of slowing down and in some cases shutting down systems that are unnecessary for survival. For example, the menstrual cycle. If we lose our menstrual cycle when we're dieting really, really hard or we are just under eating, it is our body shutting down that process because we technically don't need to reproduce or have a menstrual cycle to live. And so that's energy that's being burned typically once per month that is now not being burned to conserve the number of total calories that we are burning. Hopefully that makes sense. And so metabolic adaptation is essentially that on a larger scale across all bodily systems. And when we restrict our calories for long periods of time, our metabolism will adapt. And when we lose weight, our metabolism will adapt because we become smaller humans. 200 pounds of a human is less work to upkeep than 150 pounds of a human, right? And so our metabolism is going to be quote unquote slower if we weigh less because we've lost weight. Now, there are ways to prevent how much your metabolism decreases, and that is simply how much muscle are you losing versus fat. So for example, if you're losing fat mass, then you will be able to keep your metabolism a little bit higher because you are, what's the word? Sorry, Shane, cut this out. You're going to be able to lose fat a little bit. When you lose fat, you're going to be able to keep your metabolism higher because you're keeping more muscle mass on your body. Muscle mass is one of the larger contributors to your overall metabolic rate. And that is what's going to keep your metabolism higher and keep you from basically, quote unquote, crashing your metabolism. That is a term that basically exists because when we crash diet and we eat really, really low calories and we undernourish ourselves, we tend to lose weight, but that weight is typically not just fat, but fat, water, muscle, bone tissue, organ tissue, all the things we don't want to lose. And that causes our metabolic rate to decrease, meaning that we are going to have a lower metabolism. And when we go back to our old habits, we are more prone to regaining the weight because we don't have the buffer of having muscle on our body to keep our metabolic rate high, right? And so that is kind of a brief synopsis of everything relating to your metabolism, everything relating to why your metabolism adapts. And when it comes to a slow, quote unquote, metabolism, there's a lot of stones that you can see that we have to overturn when it comes to optimizing your metabolism, mitigating the adaptation, and improving accuracy with your tracking and your overall goals and your targets to see the best results. So basically, what I'm getting at here is I believe that most people don't really have quote unquote slow metabolisms, but we have a lot of things in our life and things that we do that force us to believe this because of how all these factors impact our results. Meaning, if you eat 1,200 calories a day and you are not seeing results, it might be because your metabolism has adapted to that calorie intake. And it might also mean that you are actually not in a calorie deficit, meaning that if you say you're eating 1,200 calories, are you tracking that? Are you tracking it to a T? Are you weighing everything that you eat? Are you doing that every single day? And are you completely adherent, meaning you're doing it 7 days a week with no breaks? Now, if that were the case, you would absolutely lose weight. But most people try to eat 1,200 calories a day and go like 4 days before they raid the pantry and overdo it. And that is typically what results in not being in a deficit, and the metabolism adapts to those low calorie days, and then it's down regulated by the time we overindulge and we binge, and then we actually put weight on when we binge over the weekend because our metabolism has adapted and it's not ready for an influx of food like that on the weekend. And so honestly, a lot of people who eat low calories don't have slow metabolisms. They're just not consistent enough to actually see the results that they want to see from what they're doing. And they don't have the attention spans or the patience to see the results that they want to see, because they would have to go multiple weeks of consistency to see that result. And most people quit before they get to that point. In addition, a lot of people have very, very high levels of stress and very low quality of sleep in their life. And this can also impact not only our metabolic rate and our functioning throughout the day, but also our muscle mass. There's actually been a few studies that have shown that when you restrict your sleep, even by just like an extra hour per night, you could be giving up like 75% of the muscle mass retention that you otherwise could in a weight loss phase, meaning you're going to lose way more muscle if you restrict your sleep in a fat loss phase than if you just slept 7 to 9 good hours per night. So we do have a podcast episode all about sleep and sleep habits and bettering those. And I highly suggest you check those out if you struggle with your sleep. And on top of that, stress throughout the day will not only impact your sleep and make that worse, but stress throughout the day can exacerbate things like emotional eating, like poor situations of judgment where we don't eat the things that we plan to eat and we go off track. And just the high levels of cortisol hormone, if we are chronically stressed, can also impact our metabolism and the way we metabolize food. So there is a lot there. And we actually go into a lot of it in more detail in some other episodes. For example, an episode with Eric Trexler on metabolic adaptation. You can watch that, and it'll give you all the nitty-gritty on how metabolic adaptation works and how to circumvent that, as well as how you can kind of turn over more stones and see better fat loss by looking at more variables. But with that being said, in the rare case that you are doing everything right, you are sleeping 7 to 9 hours per night, you are incredibly stressed, or you're not incredibly stressed, and you are hitting your low calorie diet exactly every day for months and months on end, and you're not seeing any progress, then the next thing I would say is getting labs done and looking for things like hypothyroidism or PCOS or other hormonal conditions. However, with these conditions, weight loss is not impossible. Mainly, they lower the amount of calories that you need to lose weight by about 10 to 15% on average. So you basically, if you have those conditions, need an even greater attention to detail and consistency with what might be lower calories than would be needed to lose weight if a hormonal issue had not arisen. With that being said, if you do have hormonal issues like that, having more muscle is just going to benefit you even more, because having more muscle is going to benefit your metabolic rate that much more, right? And so if you do have those conditions, if you built a bunch of muscle and you were strength training multiple times per week and your metabolic rate is higher because of that, then what's going to happen is you're not going to need to dig quite as low for your calories as if you were doing just cardio and dieting and had those conditions, right? So the relative difference might be small, whereas, you might be losing weight on 1,400 calories instead of 1,200 calories if you're strength training versus doing cardio. But for a lot of women, that little bit just makes all the difference. That extra snack that you can have, that dessert you can have within your diet to make it actually sustainable so that you can stick to it 7 days a week and not feel like you are dying. So there is so much to unpack here, but really what I want the takeaways to be is if you have a quote unquote slow metabolism, there's a few takeaways. Number one, you could not actually be hitting the calories that you think you're hitting, and you have to turn over the stones to make sure that that's the case. You can look at how accurately you're tracking your food, what kinds of food sources you are tracking. Are they packaged and processed foods? Those oftentimes are a little bit off with their labels. So the more whole nutrient dense foods that you have, the easier it's going to be to say, yes, what I'm tracking is actually pretty close to what my targets are, and that's what's going in my body. In addition, how much are you estimating? How much are you going out to eat? How much are you incorporating alcohol? All those things, we don't want to eliminate them. But at the same time, if we are in one of those situations where our metabolism has adapted, we might need to push a little bit more on the throttle during this phase, right? And so it's all about having maybe some unsustainability within the framework of a sustainable approach when we're looking at really digging into that fat loss if we do have that adapted metabolism. And then, we can look at as well, what does our output look like? Just because we're eating low calories and we're hitting those targets to a T, what is it actually doing to our energy and the way that our body outputs energy? Meaning, are we becoming a lazy sloth on the couch when we are dieting really hard? I know that's how I get. I like to be very sedentary when I'm not eating enough calories, and that's what my body naturally gravitates towards. So I have to put in a conscious effort to get a certain number of steps in per day, certain amount of movement in per day, in order to still see progress when I'm digging with my calories. So you can adapt behaviorally as well to a diet, which can prevent you from getting the output that you need to continue to stay in a calorie deficit. So there's a lot of different ways that you could potentially think you're in a deficit and not be in a deficit. And those stones you can unturn and really just make sure that you are crossing all of your T's and dotting all of your I's. And then on top of that, when it comes to stress and sleep, those things are going to drastically impact the quality of your weight loss and the ability to keep it going. Because if you're sucking at both of those things, then what's going to happen is you're going to hit plateaus sooner, because your sleep and your stress drastically impact your ability to maintain and gain muscle mass through this process. And that's going to keep your metabolic rate high or higher to make it easier for you to continue losing fat. And finally, last thing is, if in the rare case you're doing everything that I just mentioned correctly and you have gotten labs done and maybe you have a specific condition, it might just be possible that you need to dig a little bit deeper than is normal to see the results that you want to see for a temporary time frame. Even greater attention to a detail is needed there. Even greater consistency is needed there. And what might be lower calories are needed there if a hormonal issue has come up. So, that was a lot, but basically that is how you can lose fat with a slow metabolism, quote unquote slow. Hopefully you learned something about metabolism today. And if you did like this episode, feel free to let me know so that we can make more episodes like this. But hopefully I gave you some hope, and rather than, telling you that same narrative that you're broken and you can't see progress, that this actually helps you see the other side of the coin of, okay, what actually needs to get done for me to lose the weight that I want to lose? And maybe it's not actually so hard once you actually figure those things out. So hopefully this is valuable. If you like this episode, please share it on your stories or let somebody know about it who it could benefit. And we will see you guys next week.